this video we will review some facts about ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses. But before we start, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for future updates. The ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses were worshipped for millennia, but their memory lives on in human culture and history. Indeed, many of them have become famous not only in occult communities, but even in popular fiction. These information about ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses can help you learn more about these magical entities. Akka. The ancient Egyptians connected Akka with the lion as a god of the ground and the underworld. In reality, he was shown in hieroglyphs as either a roaring lion or two lions seated back to back. His most significant job, however, was to protect dead pharaohs on their way to the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians thought Akka resisted three demonic snakes, Hemtet, Ikeru, and Jag. He was assisted in this task by two other gods, Geb and Set. Akka also served as a ferryman on Ra's solar boat as it carried the sun through the underworld. Amun. Amun, sometimes known as Amun, played a minor role throughout the Old Kingdom. This altered after the Middle Kingdom, thanks to his function as the patron god of Thebes, the capital city. As Amun's significance grew, he was designated as the god Amun-Ra, with Ra. The importance of Amun-Ra made him one of the most well-known ancient Egyptian gods, second only to Osiris. The ancient Egyptians saw him as a champion of the poor and oppressed in particular. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of Amun-Ra as a semi-monotheistic deity, with most ancient Egyptians likely praying to him above other gods. Later, as Zeus Amun, the ancient Greeks linked Amun-Ra with their own supreme godhead Zeus. Amune. Amune, also known as Amonit and Imnt, is one of the most enigmatic ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses. Originally, archaeologists believed she was a goddess imagined and adored as Amun bride. Furthermore, their initial discoveries indicated that her religion developed late in ancient Egypt's history, notably during the Ptolemaic dynasty. However, further discoveries indicated that Amune existed as far back as the Old Kingdom. The pyramid texts, in instance, refer to Amune as a primordial creation goddess. Initially, the ancient Egyptians equated her with the deity Mut and Ra's wife. Amune and Mut's cults later split as Amun-Ra rose to prominence, with Amune becoming Amun bride. Ra's Anhur. Anhur, the slayer of enemies, was a god of war who was revered by the ancient Egyptians. They also admired his reputation as a caring husband who remained true and always returned to Mehet. As the patron god of Egypt's army, Anhur's celebrations included mock battles in front of large crowds. This made him appealing to the Romans, who built temples to Anhur in Roman Egypt during Emperor Tiberius' rule. Prior to the Romans, the ancient Greeks associated him with Ares, but curiously changed his totem animal. The Egyptians linked Anhur with a lion, whereas the Greeks associated him with a fish. Anubis. Anubis, one of the most well-known Egyptian gods, but also oddly distorted in modern culture. The Mummy franchise, in particular, depicts him as a dark god who forged pacts with tyrants to exchange power for their souls. In short, he became involved with the devil. In reality, Anubis' function in ancient Egypt was to protect and judge the souls of the deceased. Anubis would only allow Horus to lead the dead before Osiris after passing his judgment. Thus, the ancient Egyptians revered Anubis, erecting statues of his totem animal, the jackal, in front of their graves and even on top of their sarcophagi. They imagined that by doing so, Anubis would scare away any demons or other evil spirits who could disturb their sleep. Anuket. The ancient Egyptians regarded her as the goddess of the Nile's rapids, also known as Anuka or Anke. She was also the patron goddess of Lower Nubia, which included what is now southern Egypt and northern Sudan. Elephantine, an ancient city on the Nile island of the same name, also adored her as its patron deity. Anuket was also known as the Eye of Ra, a title she acquired from her father Ra. As the Eye of Ra, Anuket guarded the morning and protected her father from evil spirits. This, however, made her unstable, with numerous legends depicting Anuket going on a rampage as the other gods and goddesses attempted to calm her down. Aten. His name literally means sun disk, and it was previously a minor title used by Ra. During Amenhotep IV's reign, however, the pharaoh attempted to recreate Aten as the name of a new monotheistic deity. As a result, he renamed himself Akhenaten, which literally means effective for the Aten, linking himself to the god. Akhenaten also established a new capital city, Akhetaten, which means horizon of the Aten, in place of Thebes. This earned Akhenaten a lot of enemies since he forced people to reject their traditional deities and worship just Aten. Following his death, the ancient Egyptians abandoned both Akhenaten and Aten worship. Successors even demolished Akhenaten's monuments and obliterated his name and titles from all records. Instead, they simply referred to him as the enemy, with the sole surviving references coming from the ruins of Akhenaten and the neighbors of ancient Egypt. Atum. Atum, the earliest of the Egyptian gods and goddesses, was the creator deity. In fact, the ancient Egyptians referred to him as the complete one since he existed before creation. They believed he created himself from nothing and the universe in his image. He also created humans out of his gladness at discovering his children after they had wandered out. The cult of Atum was concentrated in Heliopolis, which connected him with Ra. This relationship stems from Atum's status as the original bearer of the Eye of Ra, which he employed in the tale to locate his missing children. Bastet. She was one of ancient Egypt's most prominent goddesses, also known as Bast and Bubastis. This stemmed from her function as a guardian goddess who shielded homes and families from the horrors of battle. While she was sometimes connected with the lioness, Bastet was most often depicted as a cat, a very popular pet in ancient Egypt. Cats, like Bastet, were extensively used in ancient Egypt to protect homes and families from venomous snakes. Cats obtained a sacred status in ancient Egypt as a result of their vital household role and affiliation with Bastet. This meant that anyone who intentionally harmed a cat would be sentenced to death. Similarly, if a family cat died, the family would mourn and even mummify and entomb the pet as if it were a kin. Bat. Bat, one of the oldest ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses, vanished from the official record during the Middle Kingdom. As a result of her link with the cow, her cult was absorbed into the cult of Hathor. Archaeologists believe her cult's decline was also caused by her lack of presence in comparison to Hathor. They learned, in instance, that Bat rarely appeared in human form, like Hathor did. Her representations, on the other hand, just hinted at her presence, generally in the form of a cow or a herd of cows. However, even when her cult was defeated, Bat did not fade into obscurity. In fact, she was recognized as the patron goddess of the sistrum, a musical instrument extensively utilized in ancient Egyptian religious rituals. Bennu. Bennu, one of the lesser-known ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses, appears to have had a similar role as a creation god to Atum. In fact, some archaeologists believe he was the initial form of Atum that evolved over time. Bennu, like Atum, appears to have created himself from nothing before singing the cosmos into being. His personality is later passed on to Ra, although he will eventually return to his body. As a result, he became connected with not just creation and the sun, but also rebirth. Some historians believe Bennu was the inspiration for Phoenix mythology in southern Europe and Western Asia. Geb. Geb, the soil deity, was revered in ancient Egypt, with farmers praying to him for a bountiful harvest. He was also known as the father of snakes, and was depicted in official art with a snake on his head. As a result, ancient Egyptians prayed to him to keep his children from harming them and their families. Even when snakes attacked them, the people continued to worship Geb for providing a technique to resist the venom of the snakes. Antivenom, specifically, which ancient Egyptians discovered to distill from the same venom snakes might use to kill them. Hapi. Hapi was one of the most prominent ancient Egyptian gods since he was the god of the Nile. This is reflected in his blue skin, which alludes to the Nile's waters. Because ancient Egypt relied entirely on the Nile for survival, the inhabitants prayed to Hapi to send the annual floods on schedule. They also hoped that the floods would be gentle so that their homes would not be washed away. Even back then, floods may be devastating, but that didn't stop the ancient Egyptians from worshipping Hapi. The Nile and Hapi are far too essential to curse the massive floods. Instead, they interpreted it as divine vengeance, prompting public penance and protracted acts of devotion to placate the god. Hathor. As the goddess of love, Hathor was revered as a guardian of marriage and the family, as well as a giver of many healthy offspring to couples. She was also Horus' wife, making her a sky goddess in her own right, and Ra's companion while he roamed the heavens on his solar barge. Hathor even had Ra's eye, which she used to keep evil spirits at bay. While she was most often depicted as a lovely woman, Hathor occasionally appeared as a cow, signifying another of her incarnations, the goddess of fertility. Farmers and herders prayed to her for excellent harvests and to keep their flocks healthy and safe as a result. Hatmahit. Hatmahit, the patron goddess of Jeddah, primarily acted as the city's flood protector. She was also a fish goddess, assuring good catches for the city's fishermen, which led to wealth and prevented poverty. Some documents also mention Hatmahit as the goddess of fragrances, indicating Jedeh's importance as a perfume manufacture hub in ancient Egypt. This earned her the titles Lady of Myrrh and Lady of Punt, with Punt referring to a foreign name for ancient Egypt and its renown for exporting vast quantities of perfumes and incense. Some fragmentary texts also link Hatmahit to aspects of other deities, including Isis and Hathor. Heket. She is one of the more obscure ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses, also known as Heket. Heket was a goddess of floods and fertility, which had a significance in ancient Egypt due to the country's reliance on the yearly Nile floods for cultivation. Some sources identified her as Hathor, but Heket connected herself with the frog rather than the cow. Similarly, she became acquainted with Hapi, the Nile's god. The ancient Egyptians, on the other hand, primarily concentrated on her position as a fertility goddess, specifically as the protector of women during childbirth. According to one narrative, Heket resurrected Horus after Isis gave birth to a stillborn son. Because of her relationship with resurrection, early Christians disguised themselves as worshippers of Heket in order to avoid Roman persecution. Hesat remains an enigma within the archaeological community due to her lack of depiction in both art and records, despite her significance. Hesat was once thought to be just another of Hathor's forms, a fertility goddess represented by a cow. However, Hesat later rose to prominence as the patron goddess of brewers, as beer was the most popular alcoholic beverage in ancient Egypt. This later led to Hesat's milk being referred to as the milk that nurtures humanity's life. Despite this, Hesat is underrepresented in ancient Egyptian discoveries. The investigation into this mystery is still ongoing. Horus. Horus, also known as Heru, Hor, and Ha, was the god of kingship and the sky. Horus, the only son of Osiris and Isis, succeeded his father as ruler of the earth after avenging Osiris' murder at the hands of Seth. Indeed, the pharaohs gained divine stature as the ancient Egyptians considered him as Horus incarnated in human form. Horus was also a protective deity as a result of his anger against Seth. During the conflict between the two gods, Seth tore out one of Horus' eyes, which dropped to the ground. This evolved into the Eye of Horus, which ancient Egyptians used to ward against evil spirits and spells. In reality, some individuals still employ the Eye of Horus to protect themselves against bad luck and the evil eye. Horus also played both direct and indirect roles in Egypt's afterlife. As previously stated, Horus led souls who had passed Anubis judgment to meet his father Osiris. Similarly, Horus and Hathor's sons, Duamutif, Hapi, Imseti, and Quillbot guarded the remains of the deceased from demons. Amentet. All of her names, including Ament, Amentet, and Amentit, approximately translate to she of the West. Amentet is a bit of a conundrum among ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses in that she received only little veneration. At the same time, Amentet played an important role as the protector goddess of ancient Egypt's necropoles. In fact, her name alludes to this, as the ancient Egyptians tried to bury their dead as far west of the Nile as possible. This is because they connected the western direction with death because the sun always set in the west. As a result, the ancient Egyptians built huge cities in the Libyan desert out of graves. While these necropoles had a tiny number of guards and attendants, they dedicated their spiritual security to Amentet. Isis. Isis, Osiris' wife, became famous for recovering her husband's body after his treachery and death at the hands of Seth. Osiris was brought back to life and made ruler of the afterlife by reassembling him in the underworld. As a result, the ancient Egyptians attributed mummification and, with it, the ability to enter the afterlife to Isis. Isis remained in the afterlife with her husband, allowing Horus and Hathor to rule over the living world. Despite this, Isis was still revered as the goddess of healing, maternity, marriage, and family. Outside of Egypt, the Nubians revered her as the goddess of magic, with more knowledge and talent in the arcane than any other divinity. She even developed a modest following in Rome after the Romans conquered Egypt, which lasted until the emergence of Christianity. Even so, some historians believe that the Christian practice of devotion of the Virgin Mary stemmed from the Roman cult of Isis. Khepri. Khepri is another enigma among Egyptian gods and goddesses. On the one hand, he was revered as the deity of the dawn, frequently appearing in his animal form as the scarab beetle. He was also the god of rebirth, inspired by how scarab beetles deposit their eggs within dung balls. Once the eggs hatch, the larvae develop inside the excrement and emerge as adults. Khepri, on the other hand, had no specific cult of his own, despite his importance. Instead, the ancient Egyptians regarded him as a manifestation of Ra. as evidenced by the various depictions of scarab beetles carrying the sun between their jaws. Kachnum. Kachnum, also known as Khnemu, was an important ancient Egyptian god and goddess. His titles reflect this: divine potter and lord of created things from himself. Both titles alluded to his role as the deity of clay, which was associated with the Nile and its floods. The ancient Egyptians, on the other hand, saw Kachnum as more than just another fertility god. They thought Kachnum was the one who fashioned their children's bodies after conception, as well as the bodies of all humans who have lived. This also made him a child protector god, with parents praying to Kachnum to safeguard their children as an artist would his creations. Khonsu. Khonsu, the son of Amun and Mut, was the god of the moon, as indicated by his name, which means traveler. In some ways, the ancient Egyptians considered him as a counterpart to Ra, and they adored him for lighting the night in Ra's absence. Khonsu and his parents created the Theban triad, a divine family that resembled the family of Osiris, Isis, and their son Horus. Khonsu's additional functions included time ruling, which he shared with Thoth. Khonsu was also recognized as a god of healing, particularly under the Ptolemaic dynasty. This role would also see Khonsu's cult grow beyond Egypt and into neighboring countries. Mahes. Mahes, the son of Ptah and Bastet, took after his mother as a battle and protection god. He was also identified with the lion, similar to Bastet, and his name means, he who is loyal beside her. Mahes' attributes included the weather, lotus flowers, and even knives, in addition to war and protection. Myths also state that Mahes aided in the defense of Ra's sunboat in the underworld against Apep, the primeval serpent of chaos. Mahes' titles included the Lord of Slaughter, a reference to how he showed no mercy in battle and never accepted captives. Archaeologists believe Mahes originated in Nubia, specifically the Nubian war deity Apedemek, who was Egyptianized following Egypt's invasion of Nubia. Ma'at. Ma'at, Ra's daughter, is significant because of the multiple duties she acquired from her father, as well as her name, which literally means truth. Ma'at, as the goddess of truth, was responsible for sustaining the cosmic order itself. According to ancient Egyptian tales, Ma'at reminds other deities of their correct tasks while also inflicting divine vengeance on mankind for their misdeeds. Ma'at also gave Anubis the feather of truth, which he used to judge the spirits of the dead. To enter the afterlife, a soul must either balance or weigh less than a feather. If a soul is heavier than a feather, Anubis will send it to the demon Ammit. Ma'at became the goddess of justice in both life and death as a result. Her other responsibilities included reigning over the seasons and ensuring that they occurred in the correct order and time. Ma'at was also the goddess of the stars, ensuring their appropriate placement in the sky's constellations. This, once again, mirrored her fundamental position as the goddess of truth and, by extension, cosmic order. Menhit. Menhit, also known as Menchit, originated in Nubia, which was Egyptianized following the Egyptian conquest. Menhit, a war goddess, became the patron goddess of archers, who played the most significant role in ancient Egypt's army. When the ancient Egyptians went to war, they strove to retain as much space as possible, allowing their archers to slay their enemy from a safe distance. This is reflected in Menchit's moniker, she who massacres. Menhit, ironically, served as both a protected goddess and the pharaoh himself. This was mirrored on the pharaoh's crown, which featured a snake in honor of Menhit. Montu. Montu, one of the oldest ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses, has had many identities over the millennia of ancient Egypt's long history. Montu, who was originally an aspect of Ra, became connected with the sun's devastating force. Later, he was transformed into an aspect of Horus, symbolizing the pharaoh's dominion over ancient Egypt's army. Montu was a deity of battle in all aspects, representing controlling authority over armies. In fact, one of the pharaoh's titles, son of Montu, alluded to Montu's position. Due to his brilliance as a commander and conqueror, Pharaoh Thutmose III, also known as Thutmose the Great, was even considered Montu incarnate during his lifetime. Mut. Mut, also known as Maut and Mut, was Ra's wife and a primeval goddess. She continued this position even after Ra's identity united with Amun's to form Amun-Ra, and Mut's identity fused with Amune's to form Amune-Ra. Mut's importance grew to the point where, unlike other goddesses, official representations of her show her wearing the pharaoh's crown. Mut was even made the patron goddess of Karnak, one of ancient Egypt's most important religious sites. The ancient Egyptians also devoted the Opet festival to her, which celebrated the annual Nile floods, which signaled the start of the planting season. The days-long beautiful event of the valley, where the ancient Egyptians honored the marvel of life itself, was another festival devoted to her. Nefertum. Nefertum, also known as Nefertum and Nefer Temu, represented the lotus flower, which was the first life to bloom in the cosmos after its creation. His name, which means lovely one who shuts, or one who does not close, represents this. Other tales see Nefertum emerging from the first rays of the sun to touch the primordial waters. He is also described as Ptah's son, with either Sekhmet or Bastet as his mother. The Egyptians portrayed Nefertum as a youthful guy with a lotus blossom on his head. As good luck charms, they also carried little votive statues of the god with them. Neith. Neith, a primordial divinity from the earliest few decades of ancient Egyptian society, was a primordial mother goddess. Prior to the introduction of Atum worship, the ancient Egyptians revered her as the creator of the cosmos. Similarly, she was the keeper of cosmic balance until the development of the Maat religion. Despite the advent of other deities and her own downfall, Neith's veneration endured in ancient Egypt. Instead, she evolved into a warrior goddess, as seen by her name, which translates as "she is the terrifying one." She was also the patron goddess of weaving and the protector goddess of mothers, which was ironic given her position. Nekhbet. Because her worship took place in prehistoric times, Nekhbet is one of the more obscure ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses. In reality, all reports of her existence come from the predynastic period, before Pharaoh Nama's unification of ancient Egypt. At the period, the archetypal ancient Egyptians linked her with the vulture and as a protection deity of Upper Egyptian kings. The vulture would remain a part of ancient Egypt's royal insignia, appearing with the cobra on the pharaoh's crown. However, Nekhbet's identity and position would be absorbed into those of Nephthys. Nemti. His worship dates back to the Second Dynasty between 2890 and 2686 BC, making him one of the oldest ancient Egyptian gods. He's also one of the most enigmatic archaeologists have encountered, with most records of his initial role lost to the ages. The documents that have survived show that during the height of the Old Kingdom, Nemti had mostly become merely another element of Horus. Nonetheless, the surviving records establish Nemti as the patron god of ferrymen. They also recall a tale in which Nemti offends Set by assisting Isis in preventing Set from getting the allegiance of the other gods. Set cuts off Nemti's toes as punishment, crippling the deity and preventing him from fulfilling his role. Nepa. He was the deity of grain, and his title was Lord of the Mouth, referring to his rule over ancient Egypt's staple diet. Nepa's name can also be spelled Nepra or Nepri. Official photos of Nepa depict him with speckled skin, which represents wheat ears. Originally an unique god in his own right, Nepa was subsequently absorbed into Osiris, becoming simply another facet of the latter god. Despite his diminished status, his cult remained relevant in association with the goddess Renenute's worship. This was due to Nepa's status as Renenute's son, which notwithstanding Osiris' subsumption of Nepa remained a subject of religious belief. Nephthys. Nephthys, Isis' sister, was a guardian of the deceased and shared the function of patron goddess of burial arts and ceremonies with Isis. Despite the fact that the tales also refer to her as Set's wife, she assisted her sister in finding Osiris' body. Set, however, never criticized his wife for his behavior, showing that they had a love relationship. Nephthys served as a protector goddess for temple priestesses in addition to protecting the deceased. She also kept an eye on the beer distillation process and patrolled the night for evil spirits looking to take advantage of the sun's absence. Mothers in childbirth prayed to Nephthys for strength and for their children's safe birth. Nut. The ancient Egyptians frequently depicted the goddess of the sky as a naked woman bending over the world. She was the daughter of Shu and Tefnut, and she bore four major offspring of her own: Isis, Nephthys, Osiris, and Set. According to the tales, Ra forbade Nut from giving birth on any day of the year, but Nut overcame this restriction with the help of Thoth. She bet with Khonsu, with the moon god offering the prize of a night's worth of moonlight. Khonsu eventually lost enough that Nut had 5 more evenings of moonlight than a year. This permitted Nut to have her children without violating Ra's edict. Ra was outraged by Nut's deception and forcibly separated her from her husband Geb, but Nut never regretted her decision. Osiris. Osiris, the most famous ancient Egyptian god, formerly ruled the world alongside his sister wife Isis. This enraged their brother Set, who murdered and chopped Osiris before scattering his remains in the wilderness. Isis, on the other hand, recovered all of her husband's fragments and reassembled him to become the first mummy. She then carried Osiris' body to the underworld, where he resurrected. Osiris stayed in the underworld to rule over the afterlife even after his son Horus fought Set and restored his father's kingdom. As a result, the ancient Egyptians worshipped him as the deity of eternal life, who transformed death into a portal to a new life for those who earned it. Pakhet. Pakhet, a hunting goddess who rose to prominence during the Middle Kingdom, was also a desert goddess. Her title, the goddess of the mouth of the Wadi, alludes to this, with Wadi alluding to the Nile Valley. Not only did desert hunters pray to her for success, but also for a safe return to the Nile following their hunts. Though she was mostly linked with the lioness, the ancient Egyptians also considered her as a form of bastet. Archaeologists have discovered tombs designed for mummified cats beneath Pakhet's temples from the New Kingdom. The ancient Greeks later connected Pakhet with their own hunting goddess, Artemis, during the Ptolemaic dynasty. Ptah. Ptah, another type of a creator god, is said to have created the universe by literally expressing everything in words. He created the other gods and goddesses after creating the world, again by uttering their names and outlining their functions. This gave rise to the ancient Egyptian idea that knowing the names of the deceased would grant one immortality. Much like Ptah created the universe via the power of speech, they could bring the dead back to life by speaking in their memory. Ptah was also the patron god of craftsmen and artisans, with skilled engineers being regarded as his mortal children. The first pyramids, for example, were designed by Imhotep, an Old Kingdom priest and architect. In life, he was considered a son of Ptah, but the ancient Egyptians venerated him as a god in his own right. Ra. Ra, the sun god, practically represented ancient Egypt as a whole, with the sun disk that represented him also serving as the land's symbol. His significance was mirrored in the way he governed over all of creation, as overlord of both Horus and Osiris, who presided over the earth and the afterlife, respectively. The ancient Egyptians did not regard Ra as an indolent monarch because he spent his entire time constantly sailing his solar boat. During the day, he would sail from east to west across the sky, providing light to the country. Simultaneously, his motions across the sky tempered the sun's heat and light, preventing it from scorching the earth. He would fall under the western horizon at the end of the day, bringing vitality to the underworld even as the land rested in the night, before beginning the cycle again with the morning. Renanute. Renanute, also known as Ernut and Reennet, was the goddess of the harvest. This resulted in large festivals in her honor throughout the harvest season, as a thank you for Renanute providing plenty of food for the people. Renanute was also said to have nursed Horus as a kid, ensuring that he grew up healthy and powerful. Renanute, while largely a beneficent divinity, also has an evil side. The ancient Egyptians equated her with the snake, which had the ability to kill with a single glance. As a result, they began to worship her as a protector goddess in her own right, with individuals wearing cobra-headed charms to ward against evil spirits. Sate. Sate, another war goddess, shared the title as patron goddess of archery with Menhit. Sate, on the other hand, had her own distinct aspect as the Nile's goddess of protection. During the Old Kingdom, she also protected Egypt from attacks from the south, but this role disappeared in the Middle Kingdom. This was the outcome of ancient Egypt's developing military prowess, as the kingdom gradually but steadily expanded south to conquer Nubia. Furthermore, Sate's status as Nile protector made her a fertility goddess in her own right. The ancient Egyptians, in particular, believed she played a role in ensuring the regular Nile floods. Sekhmet. Sekhmet was the mightiest of the ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses of war, and her power was so immense that only Ra could govern her. This was due to her possession of Ra's eye, which granted her a fraction of Ra's power. Indeed, the ancient Egyptians believed that Sekhmet inherited the power of the noonday sun when its heat and brilliance were at their height. This earned her immense respect among the ancient Egyptians, with pharaohs personally presenting tributes to her before wars. Sekhmet also served as a death guardian goddess for the pharaohs, defending their souls from demons as they journeyed to the afterlife. Seth. Seth, like Anubis, is frequently misinterpreted in modern media. On the one side, Seth murdered his jealous brother Osiris and usurped earthly sovereignty until Horus restored his kingdom. Having said that, the ancient Egyptians also revered Seth as the god of the desert and, as such, the primary protective god of their region. This came from the fact that most of ancient Egypt's foes thought the desert around the Nile to be a perilous barrier over which to even attempt to penetrate.